ओम श्री परमात्मने नमः। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुद्रयेत्। श्रीमद्भगवद्गीता साधकासंजीवनी 7th chapter Knowledge of the Absolute, verses 13 to 19. Description of those who take refuge in God and those who don't take refuge in Him. Lord Krishna in the 12th verse said that the entities born of Sattva, Rajas and Tamas are born of Him. Still, neither He is in them nor are they in Him. It means that God is free from matter, nature, and its evolutes. Similarly, the soul, being an eternal portion of God, is also free. But how is it bound? The answer comes. Verse 13. त्रिभिर्गुणमयैर्भावैर् एभिः सर्वम् एदं जगत् मोहितं नाभिजानाति मामेभ्यः परम अव्ययम्. Deluded by these threefold dispositions of nature, this world does not know me, who am above them and imperishable. Comment. The three dispositions, modes of nature, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, evolve and dissolve. A man, by identifying himself with those modes, thinks himself as Sattvika, Rajasika or Tamasika. Being deluded by them, he cannot deem that he is an eternal fragment of God. Losing sight of this eternal affinity with God, he accepts his affinity with transitory mental modifications. This is his delusion. Men are deluded because they accept separate entities of the three modes of nature besides God. If they accept them as divine manifestation, they can't be deluded. Delusion arises out of either of the assumptions: regard the body as yours or accept yourself as bodies. Acceptance of the body as yours is mindness, while acceptance that the self is body is egoism. This is a rule that a man can know the world by isolating himself from it, and he can know God by identifying himself with Him, because he is totally different from the body but one with God. Now, there is a question whether first the man turned aside from God or got deluded by the three modes of nature. The philosophers are of the opinion that both of them have been there from times immemorial. They are beginningless. Therefore, it can't be said which of them is former and which is later. The man should make the right use of the freedom given to him by God. By doing so, he can transcend the three modes of nature and be free from the cycle of birth and death. This proves that by misusing his freedom and being entangled in sensual ephemeral pleasures, he can't realize God. Now, in the next verse, Lord Krishna explains why a man does not know Him and how he can know Him. Verse 14. देवी है ऐसा गुणमयी मामा माया दुरत्यया माम एवा ये प्रपद्यन्ते मायाम एताम तरन्ति ते. This divine illusion of mind, consisting of the three gunas, modes of nature, is hard to surmount. However, those who take refuge in me alone cross it. Comment. The divine illusion of the Lord, consisting of the three modes of nature, Sattva, Raja and Tama, is extremely difficult to surmount. The people, because of the desire of pleasures and prosperity, can't be free from this illusion. Because of their attachment for the world, including the body and its pleasure and pain, etc., they get entangled in them. This divine illusion is hard to surmount when they accept independent existence of the modes of nature. If they don't accept their separate entity besides God, they will surmount this divine illusion. Those who take refuge in God alone cross over this illusion because they, instead of beholding the three modes of nature, behold God only. These three modes of nature are neither in God nor He is in them. He performs all actions without having the least attachment. Thus, those who know this reality don't get entangled in the three modes and cross over this illusion. They don't depend on mind and intellect, etc., because they know that mind and intellect, etc., also belong to nature, matter, which is perishing every moment. So they have a disinclination towards matter and inclination towards God because they know that the soul is an eternal fragment of God. This verse means that those who take refuge in Him, that is, those who possess the divine traits, cross His divine illusion. But those who take refuge in God's, that is, those who possess demoniacal traits, attaching importance to body and pleasures, etc., can't cross His divine illusion. Such persons possessing demoniacal traits have to return even though they may gain the world of Brahma. They have to follow the cycle of birth and death. In the previous verse, Lord Krishna said, "Those who take refuge in me alone cross the divine illusion of mine." Then, why do all creatures not take refuge in Him? The answer comes. Verse 15. Namam dushkrittino mudha prapadyante naradhamaha mayaya prahita jnana asuram bhavam ashritaha. The evildoers, the deluded, the lowest of men, deprived of discrimination, having embraced the demoniac nature, do not take refuge in me. Comment. Those who are evildoers and deluded do not take refuge in Him. Evildoers are those who have attachment for the acquired worldly kaleidoscopic things and who have desire to get the unacquired ones. Fulfillment of desires leads to greed and obstacle to fulfillment of desires leads to anger. Thus, those who because of their desire enjoy the sensual pleasures against the ordinance of the scriptures because of greed commit sins such as falsehood, fraud, betrayal and dishonesty, etc. And because of anger have the feelings of envy, jealousy and enmity and commit violence are evildoers. Desire evolves when a man attaches importance to any worldly entity. This desire leads a man to delusion and he thinks that he should enjoy the worldly pleasures and should live alive. Thus, he instead of seeking refuge in God, seeks refuge in the perishable things and objects, etc., owing to the preponderance of the mode of ignorance. The men are deluded because they can't discriminate between the real and the unreal, the imperishable and the perishable, the improper and the proper, etc. And they are disinclined towards God. Such evildoers and deluded ones can't have a resolve for spirituality. Then how can they take refuge in Him? Those evildoers and deluded ones are the lowest of men. They are lower than even animals because animals follow the rules of nature while they don't follow. Moreover, animals, while suffering the fruit of their previous actions, are going towards the human life, whereas human beings, by having this body bestowed upon them for God realization, by doing sins and injustice, are following the path which leads to hell's and animal life. Lord Krishna has declared about such people, I repeatedly throw those evil, cruel, haters, vilest among men into demoniacal wombs. Thus, cast into demoniacal worms, they sink into still lower depths. An important fact: the virtuous and vile are not those who perform virtuous and vile actions, but virtuous are those who have inclination for God, while vile are those who have disinclination for Him. Though performance of actions such as oblation, charity, penance, pilgrimage, fast is good, but when they are performed for their fruit, they are not so valuable as is the inclination for God, because God's grace enables a man to become pious very quickly, and that piousness is far superior to the piety gained through virtuous actions. Therefore, when a man, being helpless and disappointed from all quarters, calls the Almighty, his heart melts and enables him to become a loving devotee to Him. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. In the previous verse, Lord Krishna declared, the evildoers, having embraced the demoniac nature, don't take refuge in Him. Then who take refuge in Him? It is delineated in the next verse. Verse 16. Chaturvidha bhajante mam janaha sukritino arjuna arto jigyasur artharthi jnani cha bhartarishbha. 4 types of virtuous men worship me, O Arjuna: the distressed, the seeker of knowledge, the seeker of wealth, and the man of wisdom. Comment. There are 4 types of virtuous men, devotees, who worship God, namely, seek refuge in Him. These virtuous men don't perform actions for their fruit, but for God, by having affinity for Him. They are of 2 types. First are those who perform oblation, charity, and penance, etc., and other actions according to their caste and creed, etc., in accordance with the ordinance of the scriptures for God, while the second ones are those who have constant remembrance of God, loud chanting, and are engaged in narrating or listening to the stories of the drama of the Lord's human life. Those who are inclined towards God are fortunate and virtuous and deserve to be called human beings. Their inclination might have evolved either from the virtuous actions of the past, or their helplessness, or their thoughtfulness, or good company, or study of the sacred books, etc. Inclination towards Him is prosperity, and disinclination for Him is adversity. God has bestowed upon man this human body so that he may realize God. The man is independent in realizing Him. Therefore, if a man, by making proper use of this body, by giving up actions which are not sanctioned by the scriptures, is engaged in God realization, he can attain Him easily. But if he does not make proper use of his independence and does the contrary, he paves the way to hells and 84 lakh forms of life. Thus, only the persons who are engaged in adoration of the Lord are virtuous, and they deserve to be called men. The distressed sufferer, the seeker of knowledge, the seeker of wealth, and the man of wisdom. All the 4 types of virtuous men worship God, namely, seek refuge in Him. First, the seeker of wealth. The devotees who seek wealth only from God are the seeker of wealth. They worship God to gain wealth. Their conviction is that none else besides God can fulfill their desire for wealth. Holding this view, they recite and chant God's name and adore Him scrupulously for getting riches. One who resorts to worldly means for fulfilling his desire for wealth, but sometimes invokes God for it, is not a devotee to God. He is a devotee to riches. The devotees of God seek wealth only from Him. Such devotees gradually develop inclination for God, and their desire for wealth diminishes, and finally it disappears. Dhruva was such a devotee. Dhruva wanted to gain kingdom, but not by any other means besides devotion and adoration. By means of adoration, he gained kingdom, and his desire perished. Thus, a seeker of wealth seeks wealth only from God. Nowadays, people who want to earn money by foul means sometimes pray to God to grant them money. Such people are seekers of wealth, but they are not devotees of God, because instead of believing Him, they believe in falsehood, fraud, and other foul means, while the devotees depend on God only, and by having affinity for Him, adore Him only. Such devotees, because of any factor such as past influence, etc., sometimes desire for favorable circumstances. They are the devotees, no doubt, but due to this desire, they are called the seekers of wealth. Second, the distressed devotees. Such type of devotees pray to God in adversity. They pray only to God to do away with their miseries and misfortunes. Such type of distressed devotee was Uttara, because she did not seek refuge in anyone else except the Lord to get rid of troubles. Third, devotees, the seekers of knowledge. The devotees who want to know the self and the reality depend only on God, having exclusive devotion for Him. Uddhava can be named among such devotees. Lord Krishna imparted to him divine knowledge, which is known as SrimadBhagvadGeeta. Those who, having affinity for God, are engrossed in adoration of God, but sometimes because of company or past influences want to know the self or divinity, are also called seekers of knowledge. Fourth, the men of wisdom. The devotees who neither have a desire for favorable circumstances nor are worried about the unfavorable ones, nor have a desire to know the self, but by depending on God are engrossed in divine devotion, are called men of wisdom. They perceive the desirable and undesirable circumstances as sports of God. They ever remain engrossed in His devotion without having a desire in the least. The gopis, whose happiness was nothing besides Lord Krishna's happiness, can be named among such devotees. The seeker of wealth seeks favorable circumstances. The sufferer seeks to do away with suffering. The seeker of knowledge wants to know God, while the wise seeks nothing. A vital fact. Desire is of two types, spiritual and mundane. First, spiritual desire. It is of two kinds, for salvation and for exclusive devotion. In the desire for salvation, there is desire to know the self or reality. So it is not desire, it is need or want. The second kind of desire is for exclusive devotion, in which a devotee surrenders himself to God because he himself is his fragment. Thus, these desires are not really desires. Second, mundane desire. It is also of two kinds, the desire to get pleasures and the desire to get rid of pains. Desires for comforts, luxuries, name, fame, and pleasures, etc., here and hereafter, are such that they lead a man to bondage and degradation. They are demoniacal traits which should be renounced. The second type of desire is to do away with pain. The pain can be caused by fate such as flood, drought, etc., which is known as Adi Devika, or by creatures such as lions, snakes, and thieves, etc., which is known as Adi Bhautika, or it can be pertaining to mind and body, etc., such as worry, fear, lunacy, and diseases, etc., which is called Adhyatmika. Actually, the mundane desires are never satisfied, because if one is satisfied, another evolves and the process continues. Among the four kinds of virtuous men, the man of wisdom is the best. It is described in the next verse. Verse 17. तेषां ज्ञानी नित्ययुक्ता एका भक्तिर्विशिष्यते प्रियो हि ज्ञानिनोत्यर्थम् अहं स च मम प्रियः. Of these, the best is the man of wisdom, ever steadfast and exclusively devoted to me. For extremely dear am I to the wise, and he is extremely dear to me. Comment. Among the four kinds of virtuous men, the man of wisdom is the best because he is steadfast. Namely, he is constantly established in God. He thinks of nothing besides God. As the cowherdesses, while milking cows, churning curd, and discharging other domestic duties, thought only of God. The man of wisdom, while performing all the mundane and spiritual actions, is attached to God alone. The man of wisdom, without having any desire of his own, has an exclusive devotion for God. So, he is the best one. God is extremely dear to the wise because he has exclusive devotion for God without having any desire of his own. Therefore, he is extremely dear to God. Though all the creatures, being fragment of God, are naturally dear to him, and he brings up all of them without any partiality, yet those who have an inclination for him become especially dear to him. In the previous verse, Lord Krishna declared the man of wisdom to be the best of all the four. The other three are also not undervalued by him. So he declares in the next verse. Verse 18. Udaraha sarva evete ज्ञानी त्वत् आत्मेव मे मतम् आस्थितः साहि युक्तात्मा माम एवानुत्तमां गतिम्. All these are noble, but the man of wisdom is verily my own self. This is my view. For this devotee who is steadfast in mind is established in me alone as the supreme goal. Comment. The term Udaraha, noble, has several interpretations. A devotee likes God, and so does God like a devotee. But a devotee is noble because he accepts his affinity and surrenders himself first to God. He does not bother whether God calls him his own or not. 2. The devotees of the gods perform oblation, charity, penance, etc., following the rules for fruits. The gods grant them boons as desired by the devotees without thinking of the welfare of the devotees. But God grants only the boons which are for their welfare and which enhance their devotion. He does not grant such boons by which their devotion is not enhanced, and they may be entangled in the world because he is the supreme father and greatest well-wisher. So the devotees of God worship him, not caring whether their desires are satisfied or not. Thus, they are noble. 3. The worldly pleasures and prosperity obviously seem pleasant, while adoration does not seem to bear immediate fruit. Yet, devotees adore the Lord without caring for pleasures and prosperity. So, they are noble. 4. One who wants anything from God is called noble. It is so because God himself is very much noble, and he regards one who wants anything from him as noble. 5. The devotees with an exclusive devotion want their mundane as well as spiritual desires to be satisfied only by God. Because of their exclusive devotion, they are noble. The other three devotees are noble, but the man of wisdom is the Lord's own manifestation, and so is naturally loving to him. The self is naturally loving to everyone. It knows no motive or cause. The man of wisdom, by being steadfast in mind, remains established in God, who is the supreme and above whom there is none. Such a devotee, remaining unaffected by favorable or unfavorable circumstances, is always absorbed in him. He has a firm belief that only God is his, and that affinity is enhanced in both desirable and undesirable circumstances. Thus, he remains firmly established in him. In the next verse, Lord Krishna describes the man of wisdom as mentioned in the previous verse and indicates the kind of devotion he has. Verse 19. Bahunam janmanam ante ज्ञानवान माम प्रपद्यते वासुदेवः सर्वम् इति स महात्मा सुदुर्लभः. In the very last of all births, namely in this human birth, the man of wisdom takes refuge in me, realizing that all this is God. Such a great soul is very rare indeed. Comment. This human life is the very first and the very last of all births. It is the first because the actions performed during this human life lead him to 84 lakh forms of lives and hells. And in these forms of lives and hells, he has to suffer pains and tortures because of the vices he committed in the course of human life. It is the very last because a man can attain salvation or God realization and be free from the cycle of birth and death. A man should not misuse the independence given to him by God by working against the ordinance of the scriptures and against his own discrimination. In that state of the right use of independence, either he will do nothing or act according to the ordinance of the scriptures. If he has no interest for doing anything for himself, he will cease his affinity with senses, mind and intellect, etc. The reason is that when he has desire to do something, the sense of doership is born and he has affinity with senses and mind. He has affinity with the fruit of action when he does for himself. When he does nothing, there will neither be the sense of doership nor desire for fruit, and thus he will be established in the self. If he works according to the ordinance of the scriptures without expecting the fruit of actions, the momentum for actions perishes, and his affinity with actions and things breaks off, and then new desires don't evolve, and old attachment perishes. Thus, he realizes knowledge in the self in the course of time. Lord Krishna in the Gita declares, one who works without having any desire for the fruit of actions, all his actions melt away. One will cross over all sins by the raft of knowledge. The Lord liberates his devotees from all sins. He who knows God as unborn and beginningless is purged of all sins. In this way, a devotee is purged of all sins by all the three disciplines of action, knowledge and devotion. It means that the aim of human birth, the very last of all birth, is nothing besides salvation. We have got good company, sacred books such as the Gita, and realize the importance of the name of the Lord. It means that God by his special grace has given us an opportunity to attain salvation. But it does not mean that we should stop adoration, etc. We should devote our time and energy to attain him by becoming an instrument in his hands. If he had not decided to liberate us from the cycle of birth and death, he by his grace would not have bestowed this human birth upon us, whose only aim is to attain God realization. So, with the firm faith that we will attain salvation, we should follow the spiritual path by becoming an instrument in his hands. A question may arise that this human birth may be the fruit of the virtuous actions of his previous birth. If we accept this assumption, we come to know that even animals, birds and insects, etc. also get the fruit of their previous actions. If it were so, there would be no difference between men and other creatures. In that case, it would not be correct to say that the human life has been bestowed upon us by the kind grace of God. Then, how can we regard human life unique and glorious? The glory of human life lies in surrendering ourselves to God and attaining salvation. Om Tat Sat. All glories to Sri Parthasarathi, Lord Shri Krishna. All glories to Bhagavad Vani, SrimadBhagavadGeeta. Sri Hari Arpanamastu.